Welcome back, Schmoozers. I am so pumped for today's episode. I'm David Cobby, and this is the podcast where I help proud Jews promote their personal brands. As a reminder, I'd love if you could all subscribe, give me a rating, and write a review on whatever platform you are listening to right now. If you haven't already done so, please make sure you are following at Schmoozing Time on TikTok and Instagram. Please pause this episode if you haven't done that already. That's how we get information out. That's how I get big. It's unfortunate that in today's world, us Jews have to constantly defend ourselves when we openly support Israel's right to exist. I'm sure all of you have struggled with this at some point in your lives and can relate to the stress and anxiety it brings you. Luckily for you, I've got a guest today who can help you overcome these struggles, especially for those of you still in college. Please welcome to my show, the founder of Students Supporting Israel, or SSI for short, Ilan Sinelnikov. Ilan, my name, how are we doing today?
Doing great. Thank you very much. Love your Hebrew. And very excited to be here.
Thank you, Ilan. You know, my Hebrew is a little rusty. I took probably 8-9 years of Hebrew in like elementary school, and then every time I go to Israel, I always make sure to tell my relatives to talk to me in Hebrew, and that's how I really get my Hebrew better.
No, listen, I think that a big part of how American Jewry and Israeli Jews will be closer together, it's actually having a common language. You know, the big challenges we're facing nowadays is the fact that a lot of people across the United States or Canada from the Jewish community, especially people our age, don't necessarily speak Hebrew. So, in my opinion, it's very important for everyone across the United States, high schoolers, college students, to have at least a little bit of Hebrew in them, so they have at least one thing in common with Israelis. You know, knowing a common language can really bring people better together.
There you go. I 100% agree with you. So, Ilan, we like to start off this podcast by going over your Jewish geography profile. So I'm going to ask you couple rapid fire questions. Just answer them as we go. All right, Ilan, where are you from?
I'm from Chovat, Israel originally. Then I ended up in Minnesota and Florida nowadays.
Yes. And then you attended the University of Minnesota. How was that experience for you?
It was great. You know, back in the day, I really enjoyed every single day of my college career, and the University of Minnesota for sure opened a lot of doors for me and gave me the opportunity to start Students Supporting Israel. That's where we started the organization. But I'm not necessarily sure if I'll be going there nowadays, but after seeing so many different universities across the country, but it was for sure a great time when I was there as a student.
Right. And we're going to go into that later in the conversation and talk about your founding of SSI. What is your favorite soccer club?
Favorite soccer club. So they actually played yesterday. Their name is Maccabi Haifa.
Maccabi Haifa, okay.
It's really cool. They got advanced to the Sweet 16 round of the Conference League in Europe.
Okay.
And they're leading the table right now. Hopefully they'll end up with a championship at the end of the season.
God willing. So they're in the final 16. Are they expected to win the whole thing, or are they kind of underdogs?
We'll see what the drawing will show us on Friday. We might get some very strong clubs to play against us, so we'll need to find out on Friday, and after that, we'll know. You know, if we're gonna get Aston Villa in the drawing on Friday, I think that's not gonna happen. And if we're gonna get one of the teams from Poland or Turkey, there's a higher chance to be in the quarters.
Hopefully you guys get the easier team, because I want to see them advance too. Ilan, what is your favorite Israeli tradition?
Wow, the favorite Israeli tradition. That's actually such a hard question. I think you threw me off. I think in the tradition, it's honestly like Shabbat and Fridays. I think that Friday, it's a very special day in Israel, even if you're not religious, even if you're not even observant, you know. But in Israel, on Friday, when the whole country is basically closing down early, and there's that feeling of like Shabbat coming, and it doesn't matter if you even do Shabbat or not that day, but it's just like it feels different. You don't have that feeling in the United States necessarily, unless you're living in a very highly populated Jewish area, maybe somewhere in New York, But I think that as an Israeli, Friday is just an amazing tradition of like getting ready for Shabbat.
Right. I love it personally. Like when you're in the shuk also, and like you know that it's gonna close at like 3 o'clock, and it's just like you're right. Like the vibe in Israel for Shabbat is so different than the United States because it's like everybody, and regardless if you're a Muslim or Christian, like that Shabbat's happening. So, and I've had many when I've been in Israel, like I've had many like taxi drivers who weren't Jewish just tell me like Shabbat Shalom. And I'm like, whoa, like that's so cool that they do that there. It's like not a thing in America, right?
Indeed, indeed, and I think it's also that rush before Shabbat, like to get
Yes. Oh my.
to get home.
Yes.
It's just like you get home and it just like feels different, and won't be able to repeat that feeling I think anywhere in the world.
Right. So, final question for you for the Jewish geography profile. So, you speak 3 languages: Russian, Hebrew, and obviously English. Of those 3 languages, which of them do you think is the most aggressive, and why is it not English?
The most aggressive, probably Russian. And
Okay.
in Russian you can say different words or phrases that I don't think it's even possible to translate it to. But again, everything in perspective. Yesterday when I was coaching my team, the coach next to me, he was from Colombia, and he started speaking in Spanish to his boys, and I was like, oh my God, that's pretty aggressive right there. But true Russian, I think that Russian has no competition on the like aggressive
Okay, so
language.
you don't even think like Hebrew is even in the same like upper echelon as Russian, like doesn't even come close.
No, no, there's like some sentences in Russian that like you just can't even like translate it or describe it. Like you need to know the language to understand how it is, and it can get like aggressive, So that's maybe why the Russians are always like so uptight. But that's sure a good language to know nowadays. It's the for sure. Any language that a person can learn, it's a big thing and a
For
big deal.
sure. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your family's history? I understand that your family immigrated from Ukraine to Israel. Why don't you talk a little bit about what that was like, and kind of go over your family background?
Yeah, for sure. So my family was my parents were born in Ukraine. Nowadays, Ukraine was the Soviet Union at the time, in Kiev, and their parents were born there, and their parents were born there. So I think that the family can track itself to that Eastern European kind of area for a few hundreds of years. And a lot of the Jews that ended up in that area also were Jews that were kicked out of Spain, in the 1400s, and they needed to migrate east. Again, I don't know, we can track our family heritage that far down, but for sure, for a few hundreds of years in that area of Eastern Europe and Ukraine, they're not always lived in Kiev. For many years, Jews were not allowed to live in the cities. So Jews were living in different villages or different areas outside of the cities. And later on, when the Soviet Union came to power, a lot of Jews started migrating to the cities. And that's how they ended up in Kiev. And I was actually the first one in my family to be born in Israel,
Okay.
because in my family, they tried to live to Israel in the
Hmm.
70s. It did not work out. There was a very big migration wave of Soviet Jewry in the
Right.
70s out of the Soviet
Right.
Union. But it was also very hard. It had a lot of bureaucracy and corruption. In order for you to get out of the Soviet Union in the 70s, you need to like do a lot of things under the table in order to succeed in getting out. So my family was not successful, but then in their first opportunity that they managed to get out in '89, 2.5 years before the Soviet Union collapsed, they got out to Israel, and I was born there. And it's very interesting because they said that they were leaving the Soviet Union in '89. They said no one would ever imagine that the Soviet Union will collapse. The idea was that like we're living and we'll never see anyone here again. Like the Soviet Union was still technically strong and a powerful empire, right? But 2.5 years later, things changed, and later on, my family ended up in the United States, and that's from the Soviet Union. The people that haven't left to Israel came to America, and and we came to the United States as well in
Wow,
2008.
wow. What a story. Do you tell that a lot to people? Like I feel like that's an amazing story.
And I share it with people that ask, but for sure, like there's a video on YouTube. It has 1.6 million views per you, and I recorded that video in October of 2021. It was about my family's history in the Soviet Union, how we came from the Soviet Union to Israel, to America, and why it's actually, I was emphasizing why it's important to fight for our freedoms, and lived behind the cordon block and behind, not in a democratic society, and why we need to appreciate what we have here today. And also why we need to be very much aware of what's going on our college campuses, where people a lot of times try to twist the narrative or change the narrative or use sometimes Soviet tactics to blame this and to promote anti-Semitism. There was just a flyer at Columbia University of a skunk published and saying that like the Israelis like are here, and it had like the Israeli flag on a skunk. And it really reminded me of a flyer that I saw from the Soviet Union back in the 40s, a propaganda flyer with the eyes and the Jewish star in it. So sometimes you see what's happened back in the day. You see it happens in 2024 in American college campuses. We posted about it in the SSI Instagram. Those two flyers and how similar they are, one to one, with all the propaganda from the playbook. And I share the story. I think it's important for people to know the story. And if you have time, you can always watch the YouTube video as well.
All right, yeah, I'll make sure to give a link to it in the description. I mean, let's be real here, Ilan. I don't think Jews are welcome anywhere in the world except for Israel. I mean, in America, people are calling for another intifada against us. My grandparents grew up in Lebanon and they had to leave once Israel was founded. It's just like ridiculous how time and time again, Jewish people are never welcome anywhere except for Israel. It's amazing.
hmm Yeah, at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, I think that Israel, it's the place that provides Jewish people safety, and forget even the safety, because some people argue, oh, look what happened on October 7th. Or what about all those terrorist attacks or the wars? But at the same time, think about it. If October 7th would happen before 1948, before Israel was a state, what would the Jews do? They would just bury their dead, pray, and hope for the mercy of some country to help them out a little, or to restore. But this is not the case anymore. After October 7th, we've seen that we are capable of fighting back and fighting back big time. We're capable of bringing hostages back home. That was not the case with the Jews 75 years ago. So even if Israel, it's not necessarily security-wise always safe, it's for sure the only place in the world where the Jewish people are masters to their own destiny, and they don't need to rely on the foreign powers or rely on the mercy of the good Samaritans, to come and save us.
Right, right. Wow. And it is so true that Jews really can only, like, Israel is literally our only safe home. It's just the place. I tell everybody who lives, like my relatives who live in Israel, like, even though like Israel has all these bombs over our heads, whatever, like it still feels like physically and mentally, it feels like the place for me to go and express my Judaism freely. Because quite frankly, everywhere else can't do that. So it's just it's such a weird world right now that we're living in with, all these college campuses, and we'll talk about this later, but it is such a very interesting world right now.
Not every Jew needs to live in Israel. Jewish people are capable to live freely where they are. Jewish people should be able to live everywhere around the world without being scared for their lives. And it's actually the responsibility of our local governments, if we're here in the United States, so the American government to protect the Jewish community, just like they protect any other community. We're not asking for extra rights or extra protection. We're asking for the same rights as everyone else. Jews should be living here in America freely and safely. In Canada, let it be in Europe. Jews can be with a mindset of, yes, we're living here, but we will be making our way to Israel. And of course, Jews can live in Israel. But anywhere in the world where Jewish people live, and it's totally their choice, they should be protected and they should be safe. And we know for a fact that in Israel, even if sometimes there is wars, we are safe because we can fight back and we're not just taking punches one after one after one.
Exactly, exactly. And going off that point, so you're talking about Jews living safely, should be able to live safely anywhere in the world easily. And I know you are essentially like a double immigrant because your family came from Ukraine to Israel, and then you obviously were born in Israel and then came to America as a high school student. I mean, what challenges did you face when you first came to America as a high school student? I mean, especially coming to Minnesota of all places, how challenging was it to, essentially leave behind your Israeli lifestyle and come to Minnesota, one of the coldest places in the United States, where it snows for 6 months out of the year, and everybody's like, "Oh, hey there, bud," and the culture between Minnesota and Israel is immensely different. So why don't you kind of talk about some of the challenges you faced?
Immigration is never easy. For kids, it might be easier because kids don't necessarily need to like deal with like the paying the bills or finding the job or taking care of the family, right? For parents, immigration is always hard. So every immigrant, not just Israelis, like all over the world, immigrating, it's never easy. Now, for me, when I immigrated to America, actually, I cannot say it was actually too hard for me. Of course, I missed Israel, and the winter was a culture shock. I remember when I came to Minnesota, it was September 3rd of 2008, and I got out of the MSP airport, and the wind blew because it was like 60 degrees outside in September. I was like, what the hell is that? But at the same time, I remember on September 5th, I already tried out for the high school soccer team, and they made a high school team, and we started practicing, like we were training every day. So for me, like all I could think about, I'm here, I'm playing soccer every day. I'm playing soccer every day for until the month of November. We went pretty far in the sections, and then we lost in the section final. So our season lasted for 2 months almost since I arrived. It started in August. So for me, it was like everything is great. I came to a different country and I'm playing soccer every day. What can be worse than that? Oh, I made some friends. Again, the winter was brutal. The first winter was just, the first snow was beautiful. It was so exciting. But then when you realize it's 6 months and it snows until like March and there's snow on the ground in April, you're like, okay, come on. But again, it was a good experience. And maybe for me, it was a little bit easier than for others because also I had cousins who went to high school in Minnesota, so I had family here that kind of joined their friend group. But at the same time, there were a ton of challenges. The language. My English was not good. My English was very poor. I needed to take ESL class, English second language class. I remember I took geography class at the high school, and I just couldn't understand a word. Sitting there, like couldn't understand, couldn't figure out a single thing. And they reading those books, and I was like, oh my god, that's like I was not really reading it because I always kind of gave up. But overall, I think that everything happens for a reason. And maybe there was the reason for us to come to Minnesota out of all places.
So would you say soccer was your escape, so to speak? Like that was kind of the thing that kept you going, or were there other things that like you also did in Minnesota that kind of kept you occupied?
100%. Soccer was for sure my escape. It was the place where I could just go and soccer is an international language.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter what language you speak. Everyone can play soccer and everyone can compete, right? So for me, training every day. And I remember back in the day, like our high school trainings were like 3 hours long. Like we came at 5 o'clock, 5:15, and then we left home at like 8 o'clock. I was like, this is amazing. So for me, the escape, and it was a big thing that kept me kind of very highly motivated and gave me the opportunity to make another friend group and to just, find a space, find myself in a space that welcomes me.
Right, right. So let me ask you this, Ilan, you're a soccer coach now, and not all players like to be coaches, right? You have some players that are just strictly pure athletes that are just really good at the game but don't have the IQ. And I could bring up several examples of athletes that I've been around, athletes that are I think in the professionals today that don't necessarily have the capabilities to be a coach, but they're good enough to play. Then there's also the players that, have the capabilities to be a coach, but, maybe aren't good enough to play. However, Ilan, it seems like to me, you were the guy that had both. Like you had all the skill and you have the knowledge to start coaching. So let me ask you this. What made you want to become a soccer coach? And that's not an easy step to take, right? I coached little kids for, 4 summers when I was in high school, and it was very fun and rewarding, but you're on your feet all day. You're not yelling at people, but you're coaching people up. What made you so dedicated to becoming a soccer coach?
So first of all, you gave me a big compliment. A good coach, good player. So I was a good player, but I cannot say that I was like the best player out there. I was a good player without a doubt, but there were bigger stars than me on all the teams that I played. I was purely the hardest worker, like 100%. I was always the hardest worker. And when I was 18 years old, I was offered by the club that I played in. It was PSA, Plymouth Soccer Association at the time. Was offered to coach a U7 boys team as an 18-year-old, and I signed my first contract. I'm thinking about now. It's such a joke, like for $350 a season. Like $350 a season, but for me, I didn't do it for the money. And that was my first contract, and I just kept going. I was in college, and I needed to make some extra bucks, so I just kept coaching because it was convenient. And I always had a team, and then I coached older kids, and then I coached even older kids, and then I managed to get my first coaching job at a high school, at Armstrong High School, for 1 season. And then I moved to Wayzata High School, where I coached and where I played, and I stayed with PSA Fusion for 10 years, and now I coach. I think that a big part of it was just because I love the game. A lot of people ask me, we told them, like, people need to have hobbies, right? People need to have hobbies that they like to do, and I just love being involved around the game. That passion never, shut down for me, and I love to step on the soccer field and to disconnect, not touch the phone, put the phone in the car, and to look at it 2 hours later when you get back in the car, not to touch it for 2 hours. So I think with coaching, it was, until today, it's sort of an escape for me. But also, I am a big believer in, like, working with youth, and like I believe that good athletes can be good people and role models. If you're a good athlete, you should be a good person as well. And I think that sports provide a lot of students, or a lot of youth, the opportunity to be successful, sometimes outside of a field when they cannot be successful. You might not be a student, right? But you can be a very good athlete. So it gives you the opportunity to be successful. It gives you the opportunity to be disciplined, right? It gives you the opportunity to be in a frame. And a lot of people and a lot of youth needs a frame to be in, So I think that that's all of those things combined drew me to coaching. And, I always think about how, like, I disliked my coach in high school because I thought that he was like the hardest person ever, and he hated me. And I disagreed with him on the playing time. But looking back in hindsight, I think that he's an amazing coach. When I grew up and when I was like outside of the player's shoes, but more in the coaching shoes, you're like, wow, what he was doing, actually, like, he got the maximum out of those players in his own way. So all of those things, there's so much to unfold in that topic alone. But all of things kept me involved in the game, and kept me involved in the game until today. Tonight I need to go coach the game. And yesterday I was coaching my team, and this weekend we have a tournament. So
I still can't get over the fact that you only got paid $350 a season to coach a soccer team. I mean, let's be real here. Some of you have gone on Birthright and gone to the Shook and gotten ripped off for buying a necklace that's worth 10 cents for $50, okay? That's a ripoff. Then there's Ilan over here who got ripped off for coaching for $350 for an entire season. That's it. That's amazing. Guys, this is passion right here. This man loves, breathes, eats soccer. Like, this is awesome stuff, guys. Like, come on, Ilan. This is great.
to be completely transparent, the soccer season in Minnesota is shorter than in Florida. In Florida, we go August till May. In Minnesota, the season that you sign for, it's usually April till August. So it's 4 months versus August to May, which is way longer, like 9 or 10 months. And also, to be even more transparent, by the way, which is still 350, it's still a little for that. Even more transparent, like, it was $700, but then my friend and I coached the team together. So we broke down $700 or 350 each. But it doesn't matter. We're not doing it for the money. For us, it was just the experience and it was just being on the
It's
soccer.
yeah, it's never really about the money. And I think a lot of what coaching is learning how to, I mean, like you said, understanding your players' skills and, taking that, best utilizing the starting lineup and the bench. And I think with soccer, right, you get 90 minutes, and I don't know if that's still the high school rules, but you get 90 minutes plus, possibly some extra time to have these guys run up and down the field and, kill their lungs. Like it's crazy. I cannot play a full soccer game. Like I'm in decently good shape, but I cannot play a full soccer game right now. So aside from like understanding like what it takes to be a good coach, like with your players and understanding the skill levels, what is something that you personally do very well that makes you a good coach?
I think it's a big part of coaching. It's guiding the player, right? So a lot of times the players don't need you to tell them exactly like what's the answer. Sometimes they do. Sometimes you need to be firm and say like, this is how things gonna work. But a lot of it is kind of like it's called the guided discovery methodology coaching, and it's especially in youth soccer. I'm not talking about professionals. In professionals, there's no guiding the player. They need to know exactly what they need to do. Otherwise, they're not going to be in the team. But when you coach youth, you need to sometimes like help those players to figure out what's the best decision to make in the field. Decision making in the field, if you really break it down for athletes, it's more than just like, oh, this is the move. It's like, okay, this is the move, but can you do it technically? Can you execute it under pressure when there's an opponent on your back? And can you execute it at 100% for 90 minutes, right? Not just the game, but also at the end of the game where your endurance is lower and when your decision making gets worse, right? Because you're tired, your body's tired, your mind is tired. So at the end of the day, this whole guided discovery and methodology of coaches, the coaches that use the methodology, not everyone uses the methodology. I think it's helps a lot to not only bring the players to a better place, but also to be a better coach as well. Because sometimes you learn from those players just as much as you
Wow,
teach them.
wow. And I think one of the best things about these we called so-called goats, you have Michael Jordan, you have Kobe Bryant, you have Messi, all these guys, is that they're so good when they're tired, right? Like one of my favorite like quotes that like I go like whenever I'm in the gym and I'm like getting to my last set, it's like everybody's great when they're, when they're not tired, right? You can make shots, you can pass the ball very well, you can, do some good slide tackles, whatever. Everybody's good. But then the people that are great are the ones that are able to kind of push past that like little barrier of tiredness and play with a free mind, right? So I think to your point, the trying to push your players as much as possible and to not to like the brink, but to a point where they're able to get their mind mentally right so that they're able to perform at the highest level, even though they're tired, is exactly what coaches are trying to do nowadays, right? And we have all these supplements and training techniques that you know get people in shape very well. And I think back in the days when you have all these really good players, like they could have been so much better if they had today's technology, right? I mean, one person I think of is the Brazil guy Pele, right? Is that his name?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
He I can't imagine what he would be like if he had today's technology, how good of a player he would be if he had today's technology. Like, let's be real here. He would have been astronomically better than, maybe a David Beckham or guys that have had this technology and this nutrition and this science, right? And it's just so unfortunate that we can't kind of see those players nowadays.
yeah, but that's of course all part of sports sciences, sport medicine. Like the dietitians, like the mental coaches,
Yep.
yeah, the equipment, that you have, the pitch conditions that you have. But I think that the best way is, to not necessarily compare athletes from different time periods to one another. Every athlete was good for its own time period and was legendary time period. And to what you started, I think that the best athletes are being judged when they're tired and when the decision making needs to be at the finest, and it's the hardest time to make that good pass or a good shot, right? Or when the pressure is on. That's when good athletes are being judged. That's when good leaders are being judged. And that's where like also good students are being judged. That's the bottom line, I think, of everything in every field, not just sports.
So talking about time periods, let's go into a different time period of your life, right? So you're in college at the University of Minnesota and you decide to start SSI. How did you start SSI at University of Minnesota?
So it was just kind of myself being a freshman student, walking on campus, seeing a lot of anti-Israel activity outside of company, thinking to myself, what the hell people in Minnesota have to do with Israel? Like, they have no connection. They have zero stake in the game here, like zero. None of those people here that protesting against Israel, I can put money on the line that they're not even in Israel ever in their
Yep.
life.
Yep.
So like, what's the deal and what's going on here? And we decided to attend, myself and a few other students decided to attend a week called the Israel Apartheid Week events, when the anti-Israel forces blame Israel with the false claim of apartheid, what happened in South Africa. And there was a segregation between whites and blacks. Something that does not exist in Israel, something that will never exist in Israel, never existed in Israel. But many claims that they attack Israel with. And when we went to the event, we saw that the host of the event was a group named Students for Justice in Palestine. And we looked if there is a group similar to it for our side of that on campus, and there was nothing. Nothing. There was no pro-Israel campus group. There were Jewish players, Chabad, Hillel, that existed on campus, but there was no specific pro-Israel group that deals 100% of its time with Israel. So we started such a club. We called it Students Supporting Israel. We wanted to be proactive. We wanted to be visible. We wanted to be a club that is not just a Jewish club, Jews and non-Jews alike. And that idea, and from kind of being pissed or fed up with the situation, brought us to talking here in the podcast 12 years later, and brought SSI to be a club in more than 200 universities in 3 different countries, and into the largest pro-Israel student movement that started on campus by students across North America.
I 100% agree with you. Like, this club, SSI, is so useful and it helps students, really advocate for Israel in the right way. So let's talk about SSI's mission a little bit for those that are unfamiliar with it. What is your goal for SSI? There are some competitors on college campuses. You have your APACs, you have your J Streets, you have all these other kind of offshoot Israel advocacy clubs-ish, and they all have their different missions. What is SSI's mission specifically, and what is your goal for college students?
Yeah, so our mission is to be a clear and confident pro-Israel voice and to support students in grassroots activism. This is the mission of Students Supporting Israel. And what we try to accomplish is to create a unified student movement that works under one name, one mission, one goal. Every campus is a little bit different, but together as one organization all across North America. Just like you have one Students for Justice in Palestine, you have one Student Supporting Israel. You have college Democrats, you have college Republicans. But, I think that the biggest thing you mentioned, APIC, J Street, APIC is an amazing organization. We have 3 graduates of our organization from SSI that work at APIC today, but APIC is not a campus organization. They're a lobby out of Washington, D.C. that does amazing work and represents Israeli Americans' voices and the voice of the representatives. J Street it's not a campus organization. I think J Street does a bad job, frankly. I think that they could find time to criticize Israel more than they find time to support Israel, but that's a whole different topic. But all of those organizations, there are many. There's APEC, there's ADL, there's the Zionist Organization of America, Hasbara Fellowships, and Israel Campus Coalition, and Stand With Us. I can name you, probably organizations from the top of my head. But none of those organizations, it's an organization that's started by students on the campus, and it's an organic part of the campus. It's a registered club. So be a society, you need to be a recognized RSO with the university. Sometimes you have a recognized RSO with the university, which is Hillel Chabad. But Hillel Chabad are a Jewish organization. We're a Zionist organization, not Jewish. We're not doing Shabbat dinners in a society. the Hanukkah report. Our strict mission is simply to focus on Israel and making sure that we represent Israel as a Jewish and democratic state within secure borders, and making sure that we counter all the accusations and all the false claims and all the blood labels that you see nowadays, even more so on college campuses against Israel, to bring voice to people, or to give the people that have an idea, to give them the opportunity to make their voice heard when it comes down to defending Israel.
Guys, listen to this. This is a club. If you haven't heard about this before, this is a club founded by people on campus to support Israel, right? And nothing against any other Israel club out there, right? There are many great Israel organizations, but if you're on a college campus and you have an SSI on campus, or you don't have an SSI on campus, like, you need to start, like, you guys need to start one. Like, it is such a bad political climate on campuses right now, and there is such a need for this. And I know every single listener, whether you're in college or you just graduated college, or you're in high school, you graduated college 20 years ago, at some point in your life, you have had a difficult conversation with somebody about Israel, and maybe you got stuck. Maybe you didn't know what to do. Well, listen, Ilan is literally the man that is solving this issue for you guys, okay? So it is upon each individual, each one of you, to go take initiative, start an SSI, join an SSI. Like, this is a great organization to be involved in. And I'm not just saying this because Ilan's my guest, but because of because of the campus climate right now, it is so important that us Zionists, okay? You could be a Jewish Zionist, you could be a Christian Zionist, you could even be a Muslim Zionist. It doesn't matter what your religion is. A Zionist simply means, and I've said this many times before, you support Israel's right to exist. End of story, okay? Obviously, there's a lot of issues going on with the Israeli government and many other things, but that right now is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that we have so much support for Israel, and make sure that our country, Israel, is still existing and has a right to exist. And quite frankly, if you aren't doing something about it and you're sitting on the sideline saying, like, oh, I'll let this stuff pass and, like, it will be fine, whatever. No, actually do something about it. Like, this is your reminder and your sign to really take initiative and go do something about being a proactive Zionist. Because a Zionist that sits on the side and does nothing, quite frankly, doesn't help the cause. A Zionist that goes out there and takes initiative and, joins an SSI, make sure that they're continuing to educate themselves and other people on the issue, that is proactive Zionist. And I think Ilan would be very happy if all of you joined an SSI or did something to support SSI.
For sure, you're a good salesman. We need to take you to SSI, right? I'll tell you, there's a lot of you hit the point here. There's no more sitting on the sideline or kind of hanging on the fence. After what happened on October 7th, every single Jew, every single Zionist, to make sure that they do whatever they can within their powers in order to fight for Israel. Now, not every single person will be able to hold a banner and go protest. There are some people that's just not their thing, but there are some people that are good at writing, and they can submit op-eds to the school paper. There are people that are strong on social media, and they can utilize their social media in order to promote their messages. There are people that have other talents, or they're connected in different networks, and they can utilize their networks in order to educate people within their network about Israel. But we for sure cannot afford sitting on the sideline anymore, because the other side is not sitting on the sideline at all. You see what's going on in our colleges. You see what's going on across the country. You see what's happening in Israel. There's a war going on. And the Jewish people need to realize this is our time. This is the time of our generation to unite, to fight back, and to win. There is just no other option. This is the only option we have.
Yes. I 100% agree. So, final question for you, Ilan, and I know we've had just an amazing conversation. SSI, since October 7th, I feel like has become much more prominent and more important in, the news, the media. You guys have been involved in literally every single campus that's had an issue, which is amazing. So my question to you is, how do you anticipate sustaining this growth?
For sure. To start an SSI club, it's easy. To maintain an SSI club, will stay around for 10, 8 years. That's the hard part. Now, what happened after October 7th is that more than 45 or since August 2nd, more than 60 schools started an SSI club. 40 plus of them were after October 7th. Our whole goal for the entire academic year was to start 40 new clubs. And you can imagine that we already passed that goal by 20 plus in one semester. Now, I'll tell you something. I would have none of those clubs started if we could bring back all the Israeli hostages home, and if we could bring back all the lives that were lost, and have if we want to have that war. I don't need those clubs, and I wish it wasn't the case for all those students to approach us when something bad happened. At the same time, we talked about athletes, we talked about sports. I'm happy that when the harder moment came, when the challenging time came, when the pressure came, and a lot of people needed to find an answer, needed to find like a way to express their support or activism, they managed to find our organization. And to find our organization to provide them the tools to fight back. And I'm happy that we were there. And a lot of times, someone just asked me what would happen if SSI wouldn't start like 12 years ago. What would be happening with all those students? What would be on our college campuses today? And frankly, I didn't even think about it. For me, like having SSI was such a thing that made total sense. But then to hold for a second, think like, oh my God, what would happen if October 7th would take place and SSI just wouldn't be a thing? Like, because thousands of students that are doing all those protests, demonstrations, events, like fighting every single day, riding there on the college campuses, to be part of something else, maybe they wouldn't part of that be of anything. So, just like I told you that everything happens for a reason, I believe that our club was started 12 years ago. And when the war started, we were ready, we were out there. And now the goal is, of course, to maintain those clubs that joined, which is going to be a lot of work, to build a successful club. It takes about 3 to 4 semesters. So a year and a half to 2 years to build a strong club that will stay there. And not all the clubs stay. Some clubs drop out over time because it's student life. It's very liquidy. But at the same time, if we are able to set up the base for clubs like we set up at UCLA, Santa Barbara, Columbia University, Texas A&M, Urbana-Champaign, places where SSI was for almost a decade now. So that would be our success. And I hope that we'll manage to do it as many of those as we can. And even if we helped to a student for one semester, then it was just that one semester, it's still more than what would happen on that college campus otherwise. Also, we're here to help. We're here to support the students. We're here to make sure that the students are our leaders. It's not my game anymore. I'm not a student anymore. Like, we're outside of the field, but the students, people your age, they're the ones that are taking the field right now. And it's your game to win, and we're going to make sure that we provide you all the tools needed, all the sports sciences needed, all the mental health needed, to make sure that you guys are winning, because it's your generation fight and it's your generation's time to win. And I think that, everyone was talking about the TikTok generation and like the kids today, like they're privileged and they're like have everything. But at the same time, after October 7th, it was proven to me that this generation of Jewish young leaders, it's a powerful generation that is willing to fight back, that is standing up, and they're not the TikTok generation, but they're the generation of lions and lionesses, they're the generation that's going to make a big difference and will be always remembered in the history of the Jewish people moving forward.
Wow. I'm fired up. I'm fired up, Ilan. I want to start an SSI club right now at Maryland. Ilan, before I let you go, where can people find information about SSI on, social media, websites, and even your personal like social media? Like, where can people find out information about SSI?
Yeah, so our website, it's ssimovement.org. So a lot of stuff, the dry stuff, the information, the dry stuff is on our website. The day-to-day stuff, it's on our Instagram, SSI Movement. And then every SSI chapter has their own page. And so you can find if your school has an SSI chapter, just type in SSI and then the school's name. And, we have Facebook, but that's already for the older people. And Twitter, also SSI Movement. And myself, just Ilan Sinelnikov on Twitter, on the Facebook or Instagram, you'll find me there.
Awesome. Well, Ilan, this was fantastic episode. Viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, make sure you're following us on TikTok, Instagram. Make sure to also follow Ilan on his Instagram. Make sure to follow SSI. I know it's a lot of requests, but guys, come on, we got to keep the movement going. All right. And also bring them home. I have not said that yet on this podcast, but let's bring those hostages home. If each one of you does their job, advocates, like, you never know, God works in strange ways. Like, do your part, bring them home. Until next time, keep schmoozing.